Vice President Kamala Harris was in New Hampshire today and introduced her expansion of tax incentives for small businesses. She presented a pro-entrepreneur plan in New Hampshire that may soften her previous calls for wealthy Americans and large corporations to pay higher taxes. This took place at the Throwback Brewery in North Hampton, a women-owned business. The owners got support to open its current location through a small business credit loan and install solar panels using federal programs championed by the Biden administration. Here's some of what the VP said today in New Hampshire.
One of my highest priorities will be to strengthen America's small businesses. And here I am in New Hampshire to announce a few elements of my plan to do that. So first, we're going to help more small businesses and innovators get off the ground, okay? Now, I'm setting what some, I'm sure, are going to call a very ambitious goal, but you know what? I think we should admire ambition in each other. So I want to see 25 million new small business applications by the end of my first term. And to help achieve this, we will lower the cost of starting a new business. So here's the thing. On average, it costs about $40,000 to start a new business in America. That is a great financial barrier for a lot of folks, and it can hold entrepreneurs back. And the current tax deduction for a startup is just $5,000, okay? So then you gotta make up the delta there. Gotta figure out how you're gonna do that. Not everyone has access to that kind of wealth and capital. So, part of my plan is we will expand the tax deduction for startups to $50,000. It's essentially a tax cut for starting a small business. Second, my plan will help existing small businesses grow. We will provide low and no interest loans to small businesses that want to expand. And we will, and this is very important, cut the red tape that can make starting and growing a small business more difficult than it needs to be. More difficult than it needs to be. For example, we will make it cheaper and easier for small businesses to file their taxes. Similar to how individuals can take a standard deduction. You know, I said to my team, kind of like, now I'm going to date myself again because they no longer do it, but kind of like, you remember the 1040 EZ? Like that kind of idea, right? Like, let's just take away some of the bureaucracy in the process to make it easier for people to actually do something that's going to benefit our entire economy. Third, my plan will invest in small businesses and innovators throughout America. And here's why. We know that talent exists everywhere in our country, from rural towns to city centers. But not everyone has access to the financing, to venture capital, or expert advice. It's not that they don't have the skills, it's not that they don't have the work ethic. It's access to these resources. So under my plan, we will expand access to venture capital, we will support innovation hubs and business incubators, and we will increase federal contracts with small businesses. We will have a particular focus on small businesses in rural communities, like right here in New Hampshire. Finally, my plan will make our tax code more fair while also prioritizing investment and innovation. So let us be clear. Billionaires and big corporations must pay their fair share in taxes. Right that those who can most afford it are often paying a lower tax rate than our teachers and our nurses and our firefighters. It's just not right. It's just not right. So that's why I support a billionaire minimum tax and corporations paying their fair share. And while we ensure that the wealthy and big corporations pay their fair share, we will tax capital gains at a rate that rewards investment in America's innovators, founders, and small businesses. So here's the detail. If you earn $1 million a year or more, the tax rate on your long-term capital gains will be 28% under my plan, because we know when the government encourages investment, it leads to broad-based economic growth and it creates jobs, which makes our economy stronger.
All right, folks, let's talk about this with our panel. Rebecca Carruthers, Vice President, Fair Elections Center. Scott Bolden, of course, a lawyer here in D.C., and of course has worked with PACs with National Bar Association as well as the D.C. Chamber of Commerce. All right, glad to have both of y'all here. So here's the thing here, Scott, that I think is important. Look, you got your rich folks who are really upset with the proposals when it comes to capital gains, unrealized gains. You've got the Goldman Sachs report out today saying that the economic ideas of Vice President Kamala Harris will actually strengthen the economy and those of Donald Trump will not. That's pretty damn good news for the Vice President.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the Republican narrative and even some of the media narrative in regard to her not having a plan or not sharing her vision for economic recovery, she does two things really well. She says, listen, first, unlike Biden, first, I know prices are still too high. I know it's still too expensive to do business. But then secondly, she says, but these are all the statistics that you know we're doing. Eventually, it's going to touch you. So I like this small business proposal. I like the capital gains tax piece, because why would you overtax if you've invested and made $1 million or more from your investment? You want to encourage that investment. So as a former president of the D.C. Chamber of Commerce, that makes all the sense in the world, especially the small businesses. Listen, my clients who are large corporations, I've talked to several CEOs who happen to be clients of the firm. And I got to tell you, one thing they say is they don't really like Trump because of his personality and all the challenges that come with race and gender with him. But they say, listen, this just means we're going to go make more money. And I don't know one CEO or chairman of the board or entrepreneur that doesn't want to make more money. So I think this is a winning issue for her.
Well, but the thing here, Rebecca, I mean, folks who are at the top of the economic food chain, of course they want to make more money, but then you also look at the policies and how they impact everybody else below that.
You know, I think it's important to point out, especially for all those who are crying out for tangibles, with what would a President Harris administration looks like. You know what? This sounds like a tangible to me, because we know that the largest growing demographic of small business owners and entrepreneurs are Black folks, and specifically Black women. So this sounds like a policy that's targeted to make sure it's helping Black communities by making sure that those would-be small business owners have the opportunity to remove some of the financial barriers and some of the startup costs and sunk costs in starting a business. And then also for those who are currently small business owners, and just taking a step back, I believe the definition of a small business is a business that employs, I think it's 10 or less employees, Roland, or is it 50 or less? But I think it's 10 or less.
No, it's even worse. A small business in the United States is considered 500 or less.
Thank you. So
it's 500. Yes, 500, which that ain't a small business, but go ahead.
Yeah, so with the definition of small business being a business that employs 500 employees or less, even for those existing businesses, it provides some additional relief for them as well. And we know the majority of Americans are employed by small businesses in this country. So not only does this help the business owners, it also strengthens those who seek employment from small businesses.
And I was in Houston the other day, Scott, Friday after we went to see the body of my sister at the funeral home. And I took my parents out to the Breakfast Club in Houston, and I was talking with Marcus Davis, who's the owner. We were talking about, and he said, listen, he said, as a business owner, when the corporate tax rate was lowered from 35 to 20%, he was like, yo, that was huge for me. And Vice President Kamala Harris is talking about raising it from 20 to 28%. And I said, well, this is one of those things that this is where it should be a threshold. So there should be a revenue threshold that if your business generates, I don't know, 100 million or less, then 50 million or less, whatever number you want to give, then you pay a lower corporate tax rate. To me, I think that's fair. I don't think that I should be paying the same corporate tax rate as Apple or as Boeing or as another major company.
And they know that reality. They certainly know that reality. These companies, but they want to pay as little as possible because they have an obligation to the shareholders. Okay, that may make sense in the business world, but it's just fundamental inequity. And I really think that her small business proposal, Biden-Harris team has created more small businesses in the last 4 years, probably any other administration. They've provided investment capital to it. And so this is just building on a great program already. Now, a lot of those businesses were started due to COVID, but it doesn't really matter. Collectively, small businesses hire more people than large companies. And so she's hitting all the right numbers. I'll tell you something else, too. White women are going to benefit from this small business piece because they always do benefit from it because they have more access to capital. And this is just going to create a groundswell of business and economic support for her from white women, white suburban women, entrepreneurs, and those who even work out of their homes. So I was sitting next to some white conservatives yesterday on a panel, and they hated everything about the small business. I looked at them and I said, my goodness gracious, you're a small business owner, you're a woman-owned business, you have a consultant firm. This makes all the sense in the world for you, whether you go through the SBA or not. And she didn't think the regs could be cut. I said, well, she's proposing the regs being cut. And so while the Republicans want to make it a political issue, the reality is this is just good for Americans, not only employees, but for small businesses. It just is.
Rebecca, I made the point. Goldman Sachs says the U.S. economy will get a bigger boost in the next 2 years if Democrats, headed by Vice President Kamala Harris, wins the White House and Congress. This is a perfect example of how perception is completely skewed. You have people in this country who literally believe that the economy is better when Republicans are in control, which is laughable. Because as Bill Clinton said at the convention, what did he say? He said it's 50-1. Since the end of the Cold War, 51 million jobs have been created in the United States. 50 million were created under Democratic presidents, 1 under Republican presidents. The last 3 Republican presidents handed, or the last 4, whatever number, handed the Democratic president a recession. I mean, so if I'm Democrats, they need to be figuring out, hell, I need to hire a communications firm to teach me how to communicate the fact that we're better than the Republicans when it comes to the economy.
So here's the thing. It doesn't even have to be a partisan issue, because really what you're saying, Roland, is there's 2 competing sets of values. One competing set of values produces over 50 million jobs created. Another competing value only produces 1 million net jobs created. And so when you're looking at competing values, and the competing value here is, are you providing tax benefits? Are you providing economic opportunities and an economic agenda that's serving less than 1,000 people in this country? Or are you creating an economic policy agenda that positively impacts over 100 million people in this country? And when you look at it that way, as 2 competing value systems, then it makes sense in a country that's not just driven by 1,000 people, but it's driven by hundreds of millions of people to churn and make this economy grow and to make this economy move. Then it makes sense when you look at those 2 competing values that one value has a greater impact on the country than the other value. value. I think it's unfortunate sometimes when we get into the Republican versus Democrat debate, people once again are just listening to, like you said, some of the PR and the marketing, where Republicans have done a very effective job of making people think that they are absolutely better and experts and financial experts when it comes to long-term economic planning and strategy for this country, when historically that's not what we've seen since post World War II.
But Scott, Scott, what Rebecca just said there, she made the point about values, but the reality is that is political. When you talk about the values, that is political, and so
it's political, but not necessarily partisan.
No. I get that, but what I'm saying is, you do have to make that particular point because you got to make the point because you got to say, bottom line is, and again, this is the hype. Republicans try to suggest that they're for the working class. And they literally have convinced people. You look at the polling data, they're for the working class, but they vote against the working class. They vote against unions. They vote against health care. They vote against food for people. They actually vote against it. And so the reality is they support big business. Their whole idea to any problem is tax cuts. I mean, we literally saw Donald Trump push forward, Scott, massive tax cuts. And he was like, the companies, the CEOs tell me they're going to use the savings for the employees. And the CEOs were like, no, we're not. No, we're not. The CEO literally said, we're going to do stock buybacks. That's what they said. And so what you're dealing with is you're dealing with one party that has successfully marketed themselves as being great for the economy. And when they say great for the economy, that means making rich people richer, as opposed to helping regular, ordinary people, which is Democrats, and that actually helps them. I got some dude sitting here emailing me talking about, how great Trump was for the economy, and in the hood, we had money in our pockets, and man, people were hustling, and he in LA, things were great. And I was like, no. If I recall, we was in recession from 2009 to 2011, and that was the Obama-Biden economy, which they handed Donald Trump. And then, and then he was talking about, opportunity zones. And I was kind of like, no, you didn't benefit from opportunity zones. And you can't even find a single report that actually shows that. And then I said all the stimulus money that went in folks' pocket. I mean, so he was giving all this credit to Trump. And I'm like, that's a lie. And again, they have successfully marketed themselves as being brilliant minds when it comes to the economy. And they've always tanked it.
Yeah, but you being too kind to them about their marketing skills. So just call it disinformation, because in the last 40 years, that statistic you said, where it's been 50-1, and the Republicans have given us a recession economy. Well, guess what? In the last 40 years, the Democrats have done something else. We gave them a stronger economy than they gave us. It makes absolutely no sense. Oh, and by the way, add this to that statistic. Then the Republicans, with their disinformation, they criticize the Democrats for not fixing their shit. That's all you can say. And then they run on it. I mean, they're incredible disinformation squads. They just really are. I tell you another piece of disinformation, right? Because you should repeat that statistic, Roland, throughout the show. But you know, another piece is they're against entitlements. Who are the top 10 entitlement? Top 10 states that I read, they get the most entitlements from the federal government. You can name them with me. Go right ahead. Arkansas, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana,
Oklahoma, West Virginia.
Oklahoma. You can stay West Virginia. You can stay south.
South Carolina.
South Carolina, North Carolina. We're almost at 10. And statistically, it makes no sense. So not only is there disinformation to America, to the media, but their disinformation is to their own voters, right? They don't vote their interest, and yet these cats who vote Republican, men and women, are just diehard Republicans. And I think it's rooted in race and gender when it's all said and done, the whole white fear thing and what have you, because they're the majority white party and the Democrats are a rainbow coalition. I mean, you just can't get around that. So we got to figure out a way to go against that disinformation as a Democratic Party, and then make sure that the Republican following, whose policies are not popular with the masses, whether it's abortion or being reasonable gun control, how to attack that disinformation and spin it in our favor, and we be bigger, better, and brighter marketers of our own information and our own statistics that's better for this country.
Well, Rebecca, this is why I think what's going to happen next week, September 10th, in a debate. You trust me, you're going to have Donald Trump sit there and say, oh, I left you guys a blazing economy. And that's when VP Harris goes, really? 16.9% unemployment. Oh, the reason gas was so low, Donald Trump, because nobody was driving because of COVID. Then he's going to say, drill, baby, drill. That's what she can say. Really? That's interesting, because under Biden-Harris, we've never produced this amount of domestic oil, and we're now the leading in the world. See, to me, again, when he comes with the lie, they come back with boom. And that's what she goes. To me, that's what she goes. Hey, Donald, tell me how your infrastructure plan went. Because you had 4 years of infrastructure week. Last I checked, Joe and I passed a $600 billion infrastructure bill, building projects all across the country, the largest amount of infrastructure spending since Eisenhower was president. Did you do that? No, you didn't. We did. So to me, that's how you have to expose his lies. And I think what she also has to say, and let me also remind you, the states where you went to and promised manufacturing jobs, you didn't bring it back. We did. Most manufacturing in the United States in 30 years. To me, that's slice his ass on every single one of those economic points.
Because he don't have facts.
Well,
looking
at this through a diversity lens, I think what we're going to see is Trump as a mediocre white man who fails up, unfortunately does not fail down and go away. I think he's also going to try to take credit for some of the policy agenda that Kamala Harris is rolling out, because we've been seeing, like, as she started to hit the stump last week, we started to see Trump going on various social media platforms and accusing Kamala Harris of stealing his plans, when we know that not to be true. But Trump is very typical of a mediocre white man in the workplace who is taking credit for others' works, especially minorities in that same workplace. So I think what we're going to see next week is a lot of cribbing, a lot of Me Too. Well, I did it first. And, hopefully we'll see the vice president punching back, but also in a way where the American public understands what's going on and they're moving past and not listening to the media, especially the media that's criticizing Kamala Harris for allegedly not having plans. Hopefully the voters will hear from her directly and tune in and understand, hey, she's the one with a plan. She's someone who has a track record, versus this other person really doesn't have a plan other than to continue grifting and to make those around him rich.
Again, to me, that has to be the posture next week, Scott. That is, every time he lies about the economy, come back and say, that's a lie. That's a lie. That's a lie.
She can be a puncher, but she's got to be an even better counterpuncher when he starts his hyperbole, because he doesn't come with facts. And when he starts bullying and when he starts spewing these lies, her mental file cabinet, when you're preparing not only for your presentation, but your voice inflection and how you punch and counterpunch, it's like a mental file that just, right? Pull that fact up and fire away at him. The other thing is, when he attacks her, if he's stupid enough to attack her on race and gender, or he's racially or sexually offensive in some way, she needs, I struggle with whether she lets that go and stays above the fray, or whether she responds by attacking him on his sexual abuse, finding him liable for sexual abuse and tax fraud, or rather financial fraud, as well as the criminal convictions. Does she pepper him with that in response to if he gets racially or sexually offensive. But I think the facts and counterpunch is just going to be awesome. And she's got to stay focused and disciplined, right? When you're in these debates, whether you're in court arguing or you're in an arbitration, mediation, or any debate, right? You got to be disciplined, right? You got to take your time when you're cutting up the other side, whether it's cross-examination or otherwise. She's got the skill set to do that. She's got the experience to do that. And I got to tell you, I think this debate, when she tears him a new one, is going to be worth an additional 1 to 3, 1 to 2 to 4 points. I really do. People are waiting for this. She's going to set the record straight with him. And I'll be honest with you, I think they talk about how close it is. I don't think it gets closer. I think they start to separate themselves with her in the lead. I really do. If she does what she's supposed to do in this debate.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.